I forgot to change shirts, and I've done
You
this
were wearing this in another video.
two other episodes, I know. Do you want me to go change?
Should we? Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
This is our jobs now. I'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Nikta and Jason Show. Today, we're going to talk about deadlines. Nikta.
Great topic.
About having deadlines and what happens when you have a deadline.
I think deadlines are super important. So important. Oh my God, it just drives me crazy when engineers, because it's almost always engineers, are like, it'll be done when it's done. And, I don't know, like, we could take the code apart and realize that there's, it's like you take the wall down and there's mold behind it and now you got to replace the whole wall. Like, sorry, like, listen, I get it. Deadlines can change. And don't give me this shit about how, like, well, if deadlines change, then what's the point of even having them? The point of having them is to light a fire under your ass to get your job done. Like, it seems to me like people who are like, oh, it'll get done when it's done. Again, I've only ever heard that from engineers because everybody else wants like some cadence. They want some predictability. Marketing needs to know when to send the email out. They need to know when they should be like submitting that email for translations. Product needs to know when they can start speccing out the next project because they need to know how much time this project is going to take, right? Designers need to know what they should be prioritizing. Like everybody else benefits from deadlines. And then engineers, and it's like, even with like sprint planning and whatever, you just always see those little Jira tickets just roll over to the next sprint, roll over to the next sprint. And don't get me wrong, like I can feel the hate already that's going to come at me in the comments. Like, that is fine. Tickets do roll over. I'm not asking anybody to go to the ends of the earth and kill themselves and put their mental health and like, increase their stress levels to the point of just meeting a deadline blindly. But I'm saying that a little bit of pressure and some expectation that you are going to do what you said you were going to do is not a bad thing. And this is my last point, and I'll stop my rant. Like, money isn't just forever going to come and land in your bank account. Your employer needs to make money in order to pay you. And like, if you think about a project that, like, let's say 5 engineers are working on it, and let's just say for the sake of like easy round numbers that each engineer is getting paid $100,000. So that team is costing the company well over $500,000 because with the benefits and the this and that, right? It's like so much more than that. You better build shit fast that's going to bring money in if you want to keep getting a paycheck, bud. So I got a lot more passionate about that than I meant to. But that's how I truly feel. And sorry, last point, like, yes, deadlines can change. It's super important for engineers, anybody, to, first of all, ask, could we do this another way? I'm not saying like by cutting corners and by giving a shit user experience or by, whatever. It's asking like, is there another thing that we haven't considered? Does everything have to be like a super usable tool, or could we just like solve this problem using a spreadsheet? Sometimes there's solutions like that. And everyone should be asking, I don't know, like what can we do to make this work? What do you think?
I completely agree.
Really?
Completely agree. Yes.
Okay.
That there's a spectrum to deadlines, and a little bit of deadline, a little bit of constant deadline will, like you said, keep the ball rolling, and you're doing something, and you need to do that. And I think this might be a cultural thing within some companies where like the engineers just kind of, okay, well, do the best you can, and then they just get to do whatever they want and keep rolling over. I find that to be bullshit.
There's no discipline.
It drives me crazy. But there are other environments in which the devs are a resource. Like we're seen as monkeys typing on computers, and they don't give a shit. If you basically have to say, yeah, I can make the date. Like in agencies, often the sales guy commits to a date, not knowing a single
Yeah.
thing, and you can't negotiate it, and you gotta ship something.
Right.
And
You make
so,
an excellent point, Jason. Sorry, I just want to clarify that when I'm ranting about deadlines being important, I super do not mean deadlines that have been dictated to you by somebody who has no idea what they're talking about, like the sales guy who has no idea how
right.
long it's going to take to like build this thing, right? It's in my experience, it's usually like in as part of like quarterly planning or annual planning or whatever. Engineers and product managers and designers and stuff will get into a room and they will kind of set their own deadline, like more
Yeah.
collaboratively, and that is what I think we should kind of try to stick to.
Right. Okay. So, but even still, even if you have an impossible deadline, or and it comes up, right? Like sometimes an executive comes in and says, "Thou shalt ship by then." You don't have a choice. Even in companies where it's largely up to the teams.
There's like an external event, right? There's like a conference or a
Sure.
show, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me finish my thought. Okay. So even those dates, though, they clarify, they prioritize, they force you to make something. And other industries, have similar, sometimes even harder deadlines, and they're even more wishy-washy. Make a good movie that ships December 9th, 2020, right? And then like, oh shit, yeah, Christ, and then they got to do it, and they do it. It happens all the time.
Right.
Like, what's so special about writing code? I can get into. There's a bunch of reasons why engineers kind of hedge, right? But and that your point about oh yeah, there's this thing that blindsides us and it takes us 6 months to do, and we don't
The
even
mold behind the wall.
That's fine, but you can like, there are all kinds of things that happen to not deal with those things, to just like, oh, you know what, that's great, we'll defer it, and you can do that. So dates tend to clarify and tend to, you as soon as you're told, like, hey, can you, as an engineer, can you do something? Yeah, right. Can you is always yes. Oh, can you ship it by the next week? Oh, probably not. There's a bunch of things we have to do. Oh, can you tell me when? Okay, well, I think in a month from now, I can get all that done. And then 2 weeks later, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to make that. No, I'm going to be a week out. Like, you eventually get some kind of intuition for how long you're going to take.
Yeah.
But I think in the absence of being kind of held accountable, engineers will be like, you know what, I'm just going to leave early and play video games. Like, there's no deadline, there's no nothing, there's no consequence. And so then you just push off your responsibilities. But in other environments, you just don't have the choice, and you end up doing just fine. There are consequences of doing it of having a deadline, and even a tight one, right? You sometimes ship your drafts. You don't get to refine things, but that's okay. It's not what you had in your mind necessarily, but it still succeeds. And
Yeah.
so,
I mean, that's a core part of like agile development, right?
right. I think that's
not that we want to encourage like shitty product going out, but
right.
but done is better than perfect, right? I there's a sign that hangs above my desk in the office back in the day when we used to go to the office, because right now it's COVID quarantine, that says done is better than perfect. Jason, what about the scenario where a product manager is, let's say, talking to like, I don't know, 2 or 3 engineers about how long something is going to take, and they come and they say like, guys, we, whatever, something's happened and we need to deliver this feature by next week. And so now the engineers have it in their heads that like, oh shit, she's expecting it like next week, and it's like, whoa, well, we can't do that. And so everyone feels this like unspoken social pressure to be like, oh, but we can do it in 2 weeks, but really this shit's going to take like 2 months to do,
yeah,
even remotely properly or something. And so what are your thoughts around kind of like that social pressure of, and forget PMs, when it's the executive, when it's the CEO of the company, who you just don't want to deliver bad news to, you know what I mean?
Um, kind of. Yeah. So like I was in this. Yeah. So what do? I don't know. There's a bunch of ways you could handle it. You could push back, but you have to read the room. Maybe they're not interested at all. And you have no choice. You're going to have to ship this thing in 2 weeks. And well, I don't know. Maybe you let it be known that there's certain things you just can't do and you're not going to. And so you reduce the scope, you negotiate. I can't do all of that, but I can do this. And maybe you can
Right.
smaller thing. Or maybe you say yes and knowing full well it's going to fail and then wait for it to fail. Like
because that's exactly what I'm kind of getting at, is that like maybe you're sparing them the bad news now, but they're going to find out the bad news in 2 weeks when, the thing gets shipped and users start tweeting about how garbage it is.
You know what? We should devote a second show to this about deadlines. When the deadline is impossible, what happens when there's just no way you're going to make it? So we'll talk about that on another show.
Okay.
Find out by clicking subscribe when the new show is. Bye, everybody.
Leave comments what you think. Bye, guys.